Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Pennies From Heaven is over, so it's time for a hanging.
Once upon a time, America was singing the blues.
Pennies from heaven.
Now, from the music of the past, comes the musical of the future. Pennies from Heaven. Starring Steve Martin in a dazzlingly different role. As Arthur Parker, the music salesman who believes in a world where the songs come true.
No more money in the bank. No cute baby we can spank. So what's to do about it? Let's put
What are you doing, Arthur?
I was pretending.
All right, Andy, this movie is a movie in an identity crisis. Please respond.
I agree and I disagree.
Well, that sounds like an appropriate answer.
Are you saying I'm in an identity crisis now?
Well, somebody
an opinion
is.
Crisis? Yeah. No, it's an interesting movie because it really is taking the genre conventions and kind of turning them all which way. And I think that opens up the film for a much more interesting exploration of what the story's about. So I think there's definitely something here. It's a hard watch though, and so I think to that end, I can see where you're coming from, because it's a trickier film to watch. It's not just a chipper MGM musical. It's not just a funny Steve Martin comedy. It is a musical, but in context of it being musical, it's like a faux musical. It's like there's a lot of things about it that are kind of peculiar, but it's unique, and it's I'd say it's original, even though it is a remake of a TV series.
I agree with you. And though I've never seen the TV series, can we talk just briefly about the TV series? Have you seen it? Do you know what it is? Do you know if it's, I know who was in it, Bob Hoskins and, Cheryl Campbell. But did it have the same sort of convention that this one does? Was it a musical TV show?
Yeah. Dennis Potter wrote it. He also wrote The Singing Detective. And it's kind of his thing to kind of create these stories that mixes the reality of these kind of dramatic situations with fairly dark kind of fantasy. And the TV series, my understanding, I haven't seen it either. It's a 6-part, the British TV, it's like 6-part miniseries is what we'd call it over here, but it's basically like
But every episode's like 3 hours long.
I don't think they're quite that long, but it's more like The Office. They it's basically the same story. It's a longer telling of it, so you have more time to get to know these characters and really kind of get into this world. It takes place in London as opposed to Chicago, but otherwise it's a very, very similar story, just much longer.
So the convention of this thing, for those who don't know or aren't refreshed on it, is Steve Martin plays a sheet music salesman, and he is I likened him to our Walter Mitty character, right? He has these certain desires of his life and of his relationship with his spouse, and he's trying to make good on all of these things. Not a lot of money, needs some money to really grab that American dream. And in the process, when he goes into his flights of fantasy, he sings. There are these luscious kind of song and dance numbers, but all of the singing and dancing, with the exception of just a little snippet at the end, they are lip syncing songs of the era. And so that's the conceit. And if you think, hey, that sounds funny, you would be absolutely right. And it actually isn't funny at all. It's lovely. There are areas of it that are lovely. I find my memory of it was that I think I liked it more when I was younger. I came into this with a list of quibbles that was significant, but none of my quibbles ended in, I hate the movie. They're all wishes that just choices that I think were ripe for this movie to fail. And I was more frustrated than disappointed because it's a curiosity, and it's a curiosity that I found myself rooting for.
This is the second time I've watched it. The first time was actually fairly recent, like sometime in the last 5 or 10 years or so. Just because it was one of those films that I'd heard of, but I didn't really know what it was. And I was, just kind of, it piqued my curiosity. So I watched it and I was like, wow, that was a dark one. And so I knew what I was getting into this time. And I feel like it actually improved for me. Like I ended up enjoying it more because I don't know. I guess I still really struggle clicking with these characters. Like Steve Martin's character is just not likable. Like there's not much likable about him as a character. But I really appreciate what the filmmakers and the storytellers are doing by creating this kind of fantastical world that they're in. And it's a world that is kind of shaking up, the convention of a musical, and it's giving us this really, really dark story. I saw somebody online compare it to kind of a horror film, where it's really nihilistic in the way that it's treating the genre. And I think that there is something to that. It's like, we're taking a trip to hell and we're singing along as we go. And even the ending, when he gets convicted of a crime he didn't commit and executed, it still ends on a song and dance note, and they say something like, "Wow, you think we're gonna, end it on a sad note? No, we're gonna end it happy for the audience." And that's kind of how it ends, even though it's all just like in his head. It's very much, that's not really. I mean, it's like this is the Sam Lowry, sort of ending where that that he is dead. This is just, we're just giving this to you, and it almost is like we keep getting that throughout this film. You get these beautiful songs and beautiful dance numbers. Like it's gorgeous the way that all of that stuff is constructed. And then you're slapped back into the reality of how awful kind of life in the Depression era Chicago is. And it was pretty terrible. And so you can only live for the joy in these fantasies. There's nothing joyful otherwise. It's a pretty difficult film. And so I think because of that, I still struggle with a lot of the things in it. And it's not a film that I think is a perfect film by any stretch, but it's something that has grown in my estimation. And I feel like it's something that I could watch and find more appreciation with as time continues.
I want to start with one of the big questions that you and I clearly agree is worthy of a discussion as a big question. And that is the convention of this thing as a musical in which the characters are lip syncing. Does it work for you as a convention for the entirety of the film?
It takes getting used to. I think I struggled with it more the first time I watched it. This time, I think by the time I got to the second number, which is at the bank, and you have the bank manager and everybody just doing this kind of funny dance number, and the bank manager is lip syncing, and it's like this like squeaky Betty Boop type of voice, and so it's really funny. And so I think because there were elements like that, it helped me accept the song and dance numbers as fantasy. And, let's face it, we know in a musical, it's fantasy anyway. People aren't walking around doing big song and dance numbers in the real world. It's just not happening. And so anytime you see a song in a movie, it's kind of just either the movie is just kind of this fantastical place where things like that just happen, or we are kind of already going into their mind and kind of experiencing the way that they're seeing things play out or wishing things could play out. And I feel like because of that, it ends up working. And it did take me some time to get used to it. But once I clicked with it, I was okay with it. It didn't bug me too much.
That genetic thing, there's this genetic thing where some people are genetically wired to not be able to eat broccoli. Like they eat broccoli and it tastes really, really bad.
I love broccoli.
All right. So you don't have that, right? So there are people who, when they eat broccoli, they absolutely hate it. I also think a similar parallel can be made to people who see musicals and can so overtly, openly tell that they are lip syncing. And I'm one of those people. I hate it. I hate it so much. I try to get used to it. I think it's a gimmick that works better in like a Saturday Night Live sketch. But it just does not sustain for the duration of the movie. By the time we get to that same number that you're talking about, I'm fed up. And all I want to hear is these people actually singing. I want to hear their voices, or I don't. And it's not even that I want to hear specifically their voices. I know that in musicals and movie musicals, often actors are dubbed. But the conceit of singing the songs of the era out of character is the first thing that I just can't adapt to over the course of this movie. And I think it's made worse uh, because of what we know about Steve Martin as a musician, though not notably as a singer. He can carry a tune, but Bernadette Peters, who and as an absolutely stunning musician, and we've talked about that a little bit in last week. I cannot stomach watching her lip sync other people's songs as a gag. It just doesn't. I've never been able to connect that to the heart and soul of the movie. I don't see it as resonant or relevant to the story they're trying to tell, and it doesn't lend anything to the fantasy of his Walter Mitty flights for me. I just can't stand it. So that it's already like that's one of the things that starts this movie at a star deficit for me. Interesting.
So you don't think that it lends to the fantasy?
I don't. I think it's
so.
I think it's
how?
dumb.
Because it's fantastical.
It is fantastical, and maybe it's that it's a bridge too far. I don't understand the connection in a way that feels sort of pure to his flights of fancy of them not singing their own, using their own voices. I feel like if it really was a flight of fancy of him, taking control in this, fantasy world, in this dream world, if he's taking control of his destiny in these dreams, he should be singing his own stuff. It feels like a weak tie. And I just don't buy it. I never buy it.
It's the only time I've seen it happen in a musical that I recall. It's an odd, other than like, a junior high school musical or something like that. It's an odd choice to do, but I still think it's a bold one. And in a weird way, it's an odd one. And I'm not completely opposite you as far as this film goes. I'm just playing devil's advocate because I think that there are some inherent issues with the fact that they do this. But in a weird way, I slowly start clicking with it as the film progresses, even if it's not something that's my favorite thing.
It's the Stockholm Syndrome, Andy. That's what you're describing.
I do think I want to point out, I'm not sure in the TV series how they handled the music. I've looked and I don't know if it's something where the characters are actually singing or if they do it like this. So I cannot confirm nor deny.
How about Steve Martin?
I was thinking about this because this is his second film. I mean, we watched The Jerk, which was his first film after making it as a comedian. He was very popular, very funny. He does a comedy film. It's very popular, very funny for the time. And then his immediate next choice is to do this, which is just a huge left turn. And it's kind of out of left field to see him jump on something like this that is not a comedy. It's not something that you jump into because it's going to be a big box office success. It's just a really quirky project. And I actually enjoy, I think he is doing a great job in this film. And I will say, this is a film that I think, while it at the time likely was a mistake to do something like this, that was such a hard switch for his kind of new fans, that it almost could have been a career killer sort of project. But what I think it did is, and this is why I think it actually ends up being a success, because it showed right out of the gate that Steve Martin isn't just going to be a stupid comedian doing stuff like The Jerk, that he was an actor who had a little more meat and could do some more interesting things in the projects that he chose. And so I think that doing a film like this allowed films down the road to pop up, like Parenthood, or what's the one where he's like the religious kind of the charlatan? What was that called?
Adore that movie. It's a Leap of Faith.
Leap of Faith, right? Yeah, that's
what we're talking about. Yeah.
There were a whole slew of projects that he ended up appearing in that I think were because he early on in his career showed people, I can do different things and I'm going to do different things. And it wasn't necessarily a success, but it allowed him to kind of do that. So So I think that his performance, as much as I dislike his character, I think that he does a great job in the film.
Here's another one that where I totally agree with you mostly, that I think everything you've described about how this movie fits into his career is right on the money. This is one I struggle with. Like, if he were here right now, I would hug him really tight, and I would say in his ear, I'd say as I'm hugging him, "You are amazing. I love your work, and I just don't like you in Pennies from Heaven." I just, like, this character is so hard for me to get around.
But again, is it the character or the performance?
Yeah, the performance. Him in the skin of this character, I have trouble with. And so there are two pieces of it. First of all, obviously, I'm subject to the context shift. Like, I expect out of around every corner, for there to be more comedy in this movie than there is. It takes me too long to kind of acclimate to seeing Steve Martin in this particular role. It shows for me, it demonstrates for me that he's a man of great intelligence and depth, that he takes this on. I wonder if if he was the right choice for this role at this point in his career, and to be able to portray, this is more importantly, to be able to portray this like sex deprived kind of lunatic. Right. That's the other side we haven't really talked about. A lot of this movie is like hinges on him wanting to get laid, like a lot. And I just find I can't wrap my head around that part of his performance. When he's lifting up his shirt and doing the little sex dance around the house, chasing his wife, like, I find both the highs, the sort of lighter moments of that drive, that sex drive for him, and the darker moments when their marriage is sort of falling apart. I'm not emotionally invested in that. I'm always sort of outside of it, and so I lay that on Steve Martin's portrayal of this character.
Would it have worked better for you if it was Bob Hoskins? Obviously, it wouldn't fit into the series here, but would Bob Hoskins work?
Yes, actually, I think it would, and I think for a couple of reasons. One, I have more, let's say, confidence in Bob Hoskins' range to do those highs and lows with a deeper sort of texture in a human texture in the performance. And I just don't think, like, the Steve Martin in this movie is the Steve Martin that I feel like we finally reach in, as you know, one of my very favorites, The Spanish Prisoner. I feel like that's a guy that has the kind of well of sort of sadness that I don't see him tapping into in this movie. And I think Bob Hoskins is a character is an actor with more reach for that kind of darkness.
Yeah, I haven't seen, like I said, I haven't seen the original show. And honestly, I haven't seen much of Bob Hoskins' early work. So I can't say how well he fits, but still, I agree with you. He's an actor who I gravitate to more in my head with darker projects anyway. He just carries that presence with him. And so I feel like there is something about him that would end up working. Likely
who
better
else
than
I
Steve
could
Martin.
put in there? I could put in, when you think about the actors that are so well known for their comedy, I'd put in a character like Jack Lemmon. Like, there's a guy who is naturally funny and certainly has an affinity for comedic camera, but also is able to pull from a well of just not even just sadness, but desperation. Right. And is just incredibly rich in his portrayal of those kinds of characters. And so I feel like Steve Martin was a little bit out of his depth at this point in his career for this kind of character. And I think the movie suffers as a result of it.
Well, he was a fan of the original miniseries. He said it was the greatest thing he'd ever seen, which is, I think, why he wanted to be a part of this project so badly, right. and why he wanted to bring his squeeze at the time, Bernadette, on board as well, and did so. And I can't fault him that. I mean, I appreciate that he was trying something big and different. And okay, it didn't work completely, but he was trying something. And as an artist, I think that that's what you got to do sometimes. So I can't fault him that.
I certainly don't fault him. And if you look at anything in his some 70 odd, performance credits, and then his writing credits after that, like the guy is nothing if he's not willing to take risks. And so I've always looked up to that guy as an aspirational, just straight up creator. And so, I would be actually interested to see a remake of this movie with him now. That would be an interesting thing.
You already talked about your love for Bernadette. What did you think of her in the film? I mean, obviously,
I would love to talk more about
I'd
love to talk more about my love of Bernadette. I actually think that this movie is, in contrast to what we get from Steve Martin's portrayal of Arthur. I think what we get here with Bernadette's portrayal of Eileen is that exact kind of. Here is a very young person who is able to draw on a very dark energy to transform her from school teacher to prostitute, and to get from her in the classroom to the scene where she's gussying herself up and turns around and says, "Gotta go make those dollars," right? That is just such a radical and yet believable transformation for me, thanks to her, that she's just terrific. I think, for me, you watch this movie for Bernadette Peters.
Well, she had a line late in the film that I think really summed up the entirety of the film for me. She said, "We've only got one life, Arthur. We both know we made a mess of ours. It doesn't seem to matter much how it ends, does it?" Mm-hmm. That to me defined this film. And I think that she carried that weight with her. She is a character who rolled with the punches, and it was, she didn't pout and whine with the way things played out. She just kind of went along with it, and it was dark turns that she had to take as she starts she becomes a prostitute for Christopher Walken's character of Tom, and it's just not a happy place that these people end up. And I agree. I think Bernadette just nails it. She has the soul that you really feel all of those highs and lows throughout the film, and also kind of just an acceptance and a weariness that goes along with that.
Now, Christopher Walken is the other sort of big name character, although he's not in it all that much. We do get a fantastic song and dance number from him, which is what, it's a thing that he obviously has studied for a lot of his life. And we get some, as his reputation changed as one of the kind of the sort of weird dark actors who was, he was put in stuff because he's kind of a stunt cast, and his voice and his demeanor was always something that was so unique. He's a great song and dance man, right? He just has some fantastic moves, and it made me think, really wish that we got even more of this out of his career as a performer. He's just so talented. Kind of missing that great Christopher Walken dance. That made me want to go back and watch that Beck video where he's dancing on the walls. That was so cool. What do you think of Walken?
He's fine. I mean, I guess it took him, it was 2 months to rehearse his dance scene, 2 days of shooting it. And it's top-notch stuff. He does just a great job of delivering that. And I think that he fits perfectly into this world. I love him in his small role, but I think he's great in it. And the other of the main characters, Jessica Harper as Arthur's wife, Joan, the very kind of put upon, wife stuck with this philandering husband, is a really interesting character because she has to just kind of she's at the end of all of his, issues and his philandering and his perversions, and it's a really kind of just rough for her, just the way that she has to deal with everything. And it was really hard, kind of just everything that was going on with her. And I really enjoyed her little musical moment where she kind of fantasizes stabbing him to death with scissors. And I wasn't at all surprised when the police came and asked her about him, and she basically tells them to go get him. And what does she say? Make sure you cut off his thing. I want them to cut his thing off and bury it.
Yeah, she's fantastic. That was a real low point in terms of the just generally sadistic, emotional tone of this movie, and a real disappointment in. And I mean that not that I was disappointed in the movie. I actually quite liked it, but a real disappointment in the kind of emotional relationship of these two characters who had both kinda worked on their relationship. And I say both kinda. He didn't really. I mean, he manipulated his way into getting what he wants. And that was, I thought, a pretty dark statement on just his role as a man and in this relationship with her. And yet she was trying to please him and become subservient to him by kind of addressing his sexual wishes. That it just started falling apart because he could not, one, keep it in his pants, and two, he couldn't figure out how to have an honest conversation with her at all. I thought was really disappointing, and a great testament to kind of the dark fabric of this film that they were delving into.
And he's just a liar. I mean, he was just such a liar. Like, just to her, to Eileen, I mean, he's just lying to everybody. And it was really frustrating that this was the character that we were with, because it's such a dark character. And it made me wonder if watching the TV series, it felt as hard to like the protagonist as it did in this case, because you have, a 6-episode run to really kind of take your time with the characters. Here, I mean, it's, 2-hour film, and you really have to just kind of jump right in with this character who's just a problem right out of the gate.
I was wondering about that. Like, is this something is this a set of characters that you find you would be interested in spending more time with?
I understand that there are projects out there with protagonists who are characters that are just harder to like. It's, it's a different kind of storytelling where you have characters that you don't like, but you're going along with them, and you really kind of are put into their head and kind of get a sense of their world. I think that's a really interesting and difficult type of storytelling for the writer and just for the people involved. Obviously, actors gravitate to roles like that because it gives them a real meaty character to portray. But it's like Breaking Bad or something. You really kind of get into this world, and I don't know. I guess I found enough interest with this movie, more so the second time, that it actually has piqued my curiosity quite a bit, especially because just the way that the fantasy blends with the reality. I think that this could be a really interesting miniseries to look at. So yes, I am curious about it.
I would like to see that character get a win in a way that I don't think we got from Steve Martin. What do you think about the whole murder line? Like, was that an inevitable twist? By the time you get to the end of the movie, did it feel earned to you?
It did. It felt. I think that it felt like we were in this dark world, and he was a character making dark choices. And I think that there was a sense of fate that, for me, felt like inevitably this was where we were going to go, especially because, it involved the accordion man, who was this hobo he had kind of hooked up with early in the film, who has a fantastic musical number. And he's the one who kills the girl, and then the accordion man, and then how that Arthur is framed for it. I don't know, just all of those elements kind of came together, and it worked to kind of create this sense of fate that, he was, our character of Arthur was inevitably going to cross paths with all of these people, and it was all going to be a tragic end. I don't know. It worked for me.
Yeah, I see that. I struggle a little bit with it, and in this way, I started to compare the movie to a story like Chicago, the musical, and the story of Roxy Hart and Velma Kelly, and that is a musical where we have people actively singing and dancing. It's in Chicago, and it's about murder, and it is about murder from the beginning to the end. It is the story of murder, and this one feels like it's first a character story of this guy struggling to survive, and then this murder comes out of nowhere. And here we are with a character, the accordion man, who was first a character who was offered some benevolence and shared some gratitude. How did he become this guy who killed a blind girl? Like, that felt bizarre to me. And it's not because I can't handle those kinds of murder stories in song and dance shows. It's just it's weird.
I don't know. There's this sense of this place where, the accordion man always felt a little off. And his dance number is a little off. He's kind of got this exotic, weird way that he dances. There's something strange about him in his conversations with Arthur. It always seemed off. And so by the time he ends up running into the blind girl and killing her, it just, I don't know, it didn't strike me as a surprise, because this character was set up as kind of this off character. And in the world, there are these people, and I don't want to point to specifically just the homeless population, but there are people in the homeless population who are mentally ill and who have a hard time dealing with kind of just the realities of the world. And I don't know.
And that's what that's what you got out of the accordion guy?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly who he is and what he is.
Honestly, I missed everything you're talking about here. I totally missed with the accordion man.
Really? You got a sense that he was just a normal guy?
It was a story of a guy who lives in poverty and plays his music to make a living, and lives at the grace of those around him who are. I thought there was going to be a story that somehow tied him to Arthur relating to music and sheet music, and there's all this like musical subtext that never actually gets rewarded. And so I didn't like when that came along and he pivoted and ends up being the murderer of the blind girl. I was really shocked.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't. It didn't pin. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It didn't.
I wonder. I would like to have asked you. I would like to have asked you after you meet him, before you'd seen the rest of the movie. That would be where I'd say, "What do you think he's going to do?" And see if you'd say, "Oh, he'll probably kill the blind girl." That's what I want on the record, because I did not see it. And I thought that was frustrating.
But you shouldn't have to be able to see all of this stuff for it to work. And, But you
should be able to put the pieces back together after you've seen it. And I can't rationalize those things. I can't. I think it's silly. So
all sorts of people kill people. I'm not admitting to anything.
Sure.
I'm just putting it out there.
Okay. What do you think of old Herbert Ross? He's done some things that we quite like.
Has he? I don't think
I love The Secret of My Success. You shut your mouth.
Okay, I guess I forgot he had done that one. I was looking at all of his earlier films
Mr.
beforehand.
Chips.
I haven't seen that one. That's the musical version.
Yeah.
I've only seen the one that we talked about on the show.
Footloose.
Yeah, let's see. So this is the earliest film of his that I've seen now. Oh no, The Goodbye Girl. The Goodbye Girl. This, and then Footloose, Protocol, Secret of My Success, Steel Magnolias. Oh, and returning to Steve Martin with My Blue Heaven and True Colors, Soap Dish. I love Soap Dish.
Yep.
Okay, so
see what I mean?
He's got some stuff that I do enjoy.
He actually comes as his background is originally in ballet. As a professional career, and he says he was too tall and big boned and never had good feet. But he does
hard life for a dancer.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And so he definitely has a bent for musical theater, and I think he brings that to his performances. There's nothing that I can say to complain at all about the musical numbers, besides the fact that they were lip syncing. I think they were just fantastic productions, and I credit him and obviously Gordon Willis behind the camera, but for having the sense of stage and the sense of space and how to use those wonderful, luscious sets to their greatest effect. I really enjoyed watching the way he put those on stage, and I think that's certainly a credit to so much of his work and his work as a former choreographer. I mean, he was a Tony nominated choreographer on Broadway for a time. So I think he's just fantastic.
And obviously, because of his love for musical theater and film, I mean, he had done, I think, a film shortly before this called Nijinsky. I think it was right before this, which also was a musical. And so clearly it was just something that, and I guess you could say Footloose to a certain extent is a musical. I think that he enjoys that form, and I think that he knows how to kind of bring it forward. And because I think that this is very much in the hands of an assured director who knows how to handle big musical numbers. Like, the musical numbers in this are just astounding to me. I mean, really just beautiful. Like, some of them are just Busby Berkeley-esque. You've got a nice variety of them, like the little radio hour trio of the, when it's Arthur, Eileen, and Joni all singing together. The Accordion Man's dance number, the huge musical that you have at the end. It's just, I mean, it's really some stellar stuff going on here. And I think you pair what he's doing with the production design, which is just beautiful, very perfect 30s Chicago look, and Gordon Willis's cinematography. I mean, it's a really kind of just a lush, gorgeous film to look at.
I think so too. I certainly can't fault the eye.
Did you notice the recreations of 4 famous paintings?
Are you talking about Tableau?
The only one that I specifically noticed was Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. Later in the film, when you have Arthur and Eileen sitting in the cafe.
Oh, God, of course I noticed that one. That one is iconic. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, there was one New York Movie by Edward Hopper, which was created, and then 2 by Reginald Marsh. One is 20 Cent Movie out in front of kind of the movie theater, and then the other one is called what is the other one called? It's The Strippers Up in the Window. It's Hudson Bay Fur Company, and it's when he first opens his new record store, and he looks out across the way to like the second floor of a fur shop, and it's models who are standing in the window, kind of modeling the furs. And I was like, okay, there he is being a perv again, watching the women in their furs. But it's kind of a recreation of this shot. Yeah. I think that it's a really interesting way to do that, especially with these particular artists who, as I was reading about them, their work examined social and spiritual displacement of characters in relation to their environments. And I think that that is an interesting and perhaps fitting way to kind of put these particular characters into these spaces.
Music, we've got uncredited music by Ralph Burns and Billy May, but mostly the music is the stuff you notice is the stuff that they're lip syncing.
Yeah, it's a tricky sort of project to be responsible for the music for, because your music's not going to be ever really paid attention to. It's all the songs that everyone's singing.
All the songs. That was one of the things I thought was interesting. Steve Martin actually said when asked, why did this, which spoiler, it didn't do that well. Why is this considered a flop? And he said, I can only imagine we should have used, better music that was more popular in the period. And I don't know. I think it's okay to hang your hat on that. Some of the tunes were maybe a little bit more obscure, but I think they were fine. And I think the title song, Pennies From Heaven, is certainly an earworm. So I don't know that I wholly share his opinion on that being the reason the music is the reason the film didn't do that well, but it's certainly one that he was parading around for a time.
Well, and it's funny because Fred Astaire, he was very upset that
he had some real issues
that they used his footage, and he was powerless to stop them from doing so. They reused footage from his film in there. And he said, I've never spent 2 more miserable hours in my life. Every scene was cheap and vulgar. They don't realize that the 30s were a very innocent age and that the film should have been set in the 80s. It was just froth. It makes you cry. It's so distasteful. So that makes me wonder if Fred Astaire would have liked it if it was 80s music instead of 30s music.
Well, I mean, the problem is that according to Fred Astaire, the 80s aren't cinema. So,
yeah, it's another grumpy old man syndrome.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. But apparently Fred Astaire at least appreciated Christopher Walken's dancing. So that's good.
And that is well deserved. This had an interesting you want to talk about the movie poster before we talk about rights?
Well, and speaking of just kind of all of the fantastic look of this film, between Herbert Ross, Gordon Willis, Philip Harrison, the production design, I have to give a call out to the fantastic movie poster. I just really am enamored by the way that the poster looks. It's a beautiful example of Bob Peak's just solid poster design. This is one that it's a trickier film, but man, is it a gorgeous poster.
It kind of has that it's one of the family of poster designers, right? With Drew Struzan, and I mean, just has such wonderful character, that sort of watercolor feel of character with the lens flare or the light flaring out. I mean, it's just beautiful, and it paints a real picture of the period and the tone of the film, and I think it's great. And you also I think you see. I'm looking at it's too small right now, but I think is that Tom dancing right in the front?
Yeah, I can't tell either because it's so small. But
it looks like it's actually showing dancing in the poster, which would have given a lot away. So what are you going to do?
Right.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who that is, who would actually get that credit, because we have Steve Martin, Bernadette Peters named on the poster. So who is the third unnamed individual in the poster?
I mean, it could just be Steve Martin again down there. As I look at it now,
is it just
on
Steve
a much
without
bigger
a hat?
version of it? It's it's kind of him, and it looks like it's him in the black and white kind of tux outfit that he's wearing in the end when he's kind of doing the dance mimicry with the Fred Astaire movie.
Got it.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
MGM had some opinions about getting this movie made and exactly when and where things called Pennies From Heaven could be watched.
We talked about this not too long ago with the film Gaslight when we were doing our series on Ingrid Bergman and some of her films, because again, MGM was like, man, they have this thing about locking up projects that they buy and adapt. They're in that case, it was the 1940 film Gaslight that they locked up. MGM locked up the 1940 version so nobody would confuse it when they remade it in 1944. It was a very similar situation in this particular case, because what they did is they basically bought out the rights to Pennies From Heaven, the TV show, and they told the BBC that I think that they put together a contract saying that they couldn't show it again for 10 years. And but then after the end of those 10 years, they still weren't giving it back. And the original producer had to buy the rights back from MGM for pretty hefty chunk of money. Like they said for, like $100,000 or something, so that they could rebroadcast it. And so from 1980, when MGM purchased the rights, to 1992, you were not able to find the original BBC show because of this silliness that MGM does. So I don't know. It's just so weird.
And you can only watch it at the MGM Grand when you're actually staying there. It's weird. I'm curious about all of these rights handoffs. Like, do you stop and think, is this one worth it? Like, is this one worth locking up? Like, the movie ended up being, middling.
Yeah.
Not that great by a lot of people's measure.
It was a tricky one. It was a tricky one.
Yeah. All right. How to do it awards season, Andrew?
It had 3 wins, 9 other nominations. Over at the Oscars, Best Adapted Screenplay had a nomination, but lost to On Golden Pond. Costume Design was nominated, but lost to Chariots of Fire. And Best Sound lost to Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't know if I'd argue with any of those. If anything, maybe Costume Design. Over at the Golden Globes, Bernadette Peters, you'd be thrilled. She did win Best Actress for Comedy or Musical. The film was nominated for Best Motion Picture, Comedy or Musical, but lost to Arthur. And Steve Martin was nominated for Best Actor in a Comedy or Musical, but lost to Dudley Moore in Arthur. And
I'm okay with that for sure.
Yeah, Dudley Moore, I think, was great in that film. And the only other thing I was going to point out, Gordon Willis, his cinematography did win at the Boston Society of Film Critics and the National Society of Film Critics, was nominated for the New York Film Critics Circle, but he lost to Chariots of Fire for that one.
Then we get to the central question of the night. I already spoiled it. It didn't do very well, but how not very well did it not do?
Yeah, it was a tough one. On the success of Martin's last film, Herbert Ross got $22 million for this. More, we'd say, experimental film, which is about $62 million in today's dollars. The movie opened December 11th, 1981 on a very busy pre-holiday weekend, opening opposite 4 other releases: Buddy Buddy, Dawn of the Mummy, 4 Friends, and Rollover. None of the films other than this one could even crack the top 20. However, and even this one only made it to spot 14, which was not a good sign. The movie didn't end up making much, only earning $9.2 million back, or $25.8 million in today's dollars. That puts the movie at an adjusted loss per finished minute of $335,000. Not a great second outing for Steve Martin. I just have to point this out. This is an IMDb trivia note that I think speaks. I don't know if there's any sense of this being real. I can't imagine it is. It just seems like somebody put it in here to be cheeky. It just says Steve Martin chose to do this movie rather than Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yep.
That would have made that film a totally different experience.
Totally different experience. Hey, as we close up here, I want to just mention I've got the write-up from the BBC version. I just want to read a little bit of it so that we can look at some similarities. 6-part miniseries remains one of the edgiest, most audacious things ever conceived for television. Tells the story of Arthur Parker, a sheet music salesman in 1930s England, beaten down by economic hard times and the sexual indifference of his proper wife. Arthur cannot understand why his life can't be like the beautiful songs he loves. On a sales trip through the forest of Dean, he meets a virginal rural woman he suspects may be his ideal. Ruination follows. Punctuating virtually every scene is a vintage pop song, lip-synced and sometimes danced out by the characters. This startling innovation makes the contrast between Arthur's brutish life and his bourgeois dreams even more dramatic. Potter's dark vision digs into British stoicism, sexual repression, the class system, and even the coming of fascism in Europe. It is especially poignant on the subject of the divide between art and reality. I want to see that.
Well, I guess you do want to watch the BBC miniseries then.
I do want to watch the BBC miniseries. That's what I want to see. And on that last point, I wonder if adding those elements of British stoicism, British sexual repression, the class system in Britain, and the coming of fascism to Europe makes the context of that film or of that series more compelling than having it sort of transported to Chicago, the Depression era Chicago. I wonder if the story demands some of those quintessentially British cultural elements that make it a more robust or rich story. I'm very curious now.
I have a feeling that you're still going to complain about the lip syncing.
Probably that. No, I'm already complaining about it. Just seeing it written there, I'm already bitching about that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. But I want to see some Bob Hoskins. I think I can get behind that. Yeah. Very excited.
All right. I liked this one. And it's definitely something that I'd be curious to watch again. I think that it can grow on me. So it's not my favorite of Steve Martin's films, and it's a very peculiar musical, but I don't know. I think there's something here.
Very peculiar indeed. Let's take it to the mat.
Let's do it.
Head to flickchart.com/thenextreel, and you'll see the list of all the movies that Andy and I have talked about for however long we've been talking about movies. And if you click on or tap on the word Flickchart in your show notes, you'll be taken straight to this movie in the Flickchart database where you can add it to your list and see how it stands up against ours.
First up, Pennies from Heaven or Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Robin Hood.
I'm going to say Robin Hood. Pennies from Heaven or David Cronenberg's Shivers. I'm going to say Pennies from Heaven.
I went with Shivers on this one. Okay. And it ended up being decisive on my own list. This was the middle point, which I feel weird about because I think I'm liking Shivers more every time I rank against it.
Wow, that's funny.
Enough so that I think we need to play it out.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
Paper.
Scissors. Pennies from Heaven takes it.
And a decisive win.
Pennies from Heaven or Russian Dolls. We'll take Pennies from Heaven.
I will take Pennies from Heaven.
Pennies from Heaven, which the last one is funny because it's speaking of unlikable characters.
Yeah, right.
Pennies from Heaven or Big Fish.
Please.
I'm going to give you Big Fish.
There we go.
I know you're surprised by that.
I am surprised, but it's right.
Pennies from Heaven or the 2005 remake of The Producers.
The Producers.
Musical
absolutely.
v. musical.
A bona fide, legit musical versus a lip sync dancing drama.
I had some issues with the musical, but I'm going to pick The Producers, though. I'm with you. Pennies from Heaven or What's Up, Doc? Oh, definitely What's Up, Doc.
What's Up, Doc?
Pennies from Heaven or Gremlins? Absolutely Gremlins.
Yeah.
Pennies from Heaven or No? The Chilean.
No. I'm going to go with no. Political
I'm going to go with Pennies from Heaven.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I feel like I need to get Gabrielle on the phone. Okay, let's do it.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Rock. Scissors. Rock.
Scissors.
Nice.
All right, no takes it. Pennies from Heaven or Princess Mononoke?
Princess Mononoke.
I will take Princess Mononoke as well. Well, that lands Pennies from Heaven in spot 268 on our chart. 268 out of 427, which is about a 37%.
All right, how'd it do on your own?
It did better on mine, and it went up from the last time. The last time it was pretty low to the bottom. Now it landed at 2387 out of 4231, which is about a 44%.
This one landed at 1140 out of 1415, which is a 19%. And I'll tell you, I disagree with it because there were some things, as much as I'm complaining about the movie and some of these elements, I do feel like it is it's got some things going for it. And I opened saying that I was kind of rooting for this movie, and I'm still rooting for the movie. Like I sort of want it to get better next time I watch it. So I'm going to end up with a solid 2-star over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel. I'm going to ignore the algorithm this time and jump it up from what is suggested, a 1-star, which feels
pretty
catastrophically low.
I assume you're ignoring the heart as well, though.
Yeah, I'll ignore the heart for now.
Well, I'm giving it 3 stars and a heart.
Really?
There is enough here that really piques my curiosity, and it's imperfect, but I find it fascinating. So that's where I sit.
There you go. Where do we go from here? Please tell me there's another incredibly depressing drama of murder and classism coming next.
Well, murder, yes. Classism, not quite as much. We are going to be looking at another, I guess you could argue, experimental film for Steve Martin. It's just a year later, 1982, and returning to Carl Reiner again for this one. It is the very unique film Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid.
Okay. All right. Do you know this film? Is this one of the ones that you've seen?
I have seen it now, but only because
so this was your first time.
It was my first time watching it, yes.
Can't tell the mic's in the way. Are you smiling?
I'm not saying one way or another. I'm not giving you anything.
Oh, for crying out loud. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andrew.
As Amazon always doeth.
People like to talk about the potty mouths in this movie.
Potty.
Yeah. Do you want to take this one on first?
I'll kick it off. I've got a 3-star just like mine.
Oh.
I know. By Sherry there. Sherry there says, if only this video would have cost pennies rather than dollars.
That's it?
That's it. But see how she brought in Pennies from Heaven. And
she did. She worked that in and ended up making a valid economic argument.
Yes.
Against this movie.
I'm just saying it's okay if it was cheaper, I think is what she's saying.
All right. Well, I've got one from Ms. Flasson from December 13th, 1999, who says, crude and vulgar. This movie sickened me. The music was great, but the way it was used in the movie didn't do it justice. To be frank, I hated this movie. I couldn't find anything to like about it. Steve Martin and Bernadette Peters were as wonderful as they always are, but I really hate to see talent wasted. I really can't understand what kind of sick and twisted mind would write a screenplay like that. I was completely disgusted with the utter lack of any kind of loyalty and honest, decent charity for mankind. It was very unrealistic, and I found it not amusing at all. If it was supposed to be, it was only feeding the perverse minds of people who enjoy that. So,
I think she's
that's you that she's talking about.
Totally talking about me.
Yes, so
Meanie.
that's gotta feel something, right?
Yeah.
Great.
I feel something.
Things we learn about each other. Pervert. Thanks, Amazon. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We are highlighting adaptations from Season 9 over at our originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. That's the site where listeners can purchase the source material for all of our adapted film discussions.
We had a big Robin Hood series this season, looking at 9 different versions on screen. Many were likely adapted from Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, including Douglas Fairbanks in Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, and the 1991 Robin Hood, and Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Robin and Marian was specifically based on the ballad The Jest of Robin Hood.
And we really don't have too much to say about Robin and the Seven Hoods.
We talked Dead Ringers for our David Cronenberg series adapted from Barry Wood and Jack Geislin's novel Twins.
Have you checked out that show?
I haven't, but I've heard great things.
2 comedies from our Steve Martin series were adaptations, Pennies from Heaven from the BBC series, and The Lonely Guy from the book by Bruce J. Friedman.
The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas was part of our Colin Higgins series, adapted from the Broadway musical.
Spike Lee brought us Black Klansman from Ron Stallworth's memoir.
And we looked at a trio of John le Carré adaptations, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Little Drummer Girl, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Plus, all 3 movies in our Agnieszka Holland series were based on books, Europa, Europa, In Darkness, and Spore.
La Cage aux Folles and its remake The Birdcage both came from Jean Poiret's original play.
We also talked about Arsenic and Old Lace and Charade in our Cary Grant series.
All of these were based on other material, and it is all available on our originals page, thenextreel.com/originals. Every book purchased supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations we've covered and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.